For 3,000 years, everyone has told you the same story. Odysseus spent 20 years trying to get home because he loved his wife. He was faithful. He was devoted. He was the loyal husband fighting his way back to Penelope against gods and monsters and the wrath of the sea itself. That is the story every film tells you, every classroom, every retelling. Homer tells you something else entirely. Homer tells you that Odysseus spent 7 of those years in the bed of a goddess who offered him immortality. Willingly. And when he wept on the shore every morning, it was not for Penelope. Subscribe, because what Homer actually wrote will change how you see this story forever. Odysseus was not the strongest man at Troy, not the tallest, not the most feared in battle. When he stood still, Homer says he looked like nothing, like any other man. But he was the most clever man alive, and he knew it. And that cleverness was his gift, his curse, and eventually his only companion when everything else was gone. 20 years he was away from home, 10 fighting a war that started over someone else's wife, 10 trying to get back across a sea that a god had personally decided to make fatal for him. Gods hunted him. Monsters ate his men, a witch imprisoned him. And then Calypso offered him the one thing no monster or god had offered before. A way out, not death, the opposite, immortality. Stay on the island, live forever, never suffer again, never lose anyone again, because there would be no more loss, no more time, no more end to anything. He said no every single day for 7 years. The standard reading of this is romantic. He loved Penelope. He was faithful. He wanted to go home. That is what every film version tells you because it is the version that fits on a poster. Homer tells you something completely different. Homer tells you that Odysseus wept every morning on the shore. Not for Penelope. Homer is specific about this. He wept because he was disappearing, because every morning he woke up on an island no one had heard of, with a name no one would ever sing, doing nothing that would be remembered. And for a man like Odysseus, a man whose entire identity was built on being the most clever, the most cunning, the one who thought of the wooden horse, the one who got out of the cave, the one the gods could not ignore, that was not life. That was a living death dressed up as paradise. The Greeks had a word for it. Kleos, glory, reputation, the story that gets told about you after you die. It was not vanity. It was the only immortality that actually mattered, not living forever on a deserted island, but being remembered, being sung about, being the answer to the question, who was the greatest, the most clever, the most remarkable man who ever lived? Calypso's offer was not eternal life. It was eternal anonymity. And Odysseus would rather die as himself than live forever as nobody. Look at every single obstacle in the poem through this lens, and everything clicks into place. The Lotus Eaters give his men a plant that makes them forget who they are and where they are going. They are happy. Genuinely, chemically happy. Odysseus drags them back to the ships by force. He will not allow forgetting, not for them, not for himself. Because a man who has forgotten where he is going has already ceased to exist in the only way that matters. The sirens offer knowledge, the one temptation Odysseus cannot resist. He orders his men to tie him to the mast and seal their own ears with wax. He alone will hear them. He wants everything the world has to offer, and he will find a way to take it without losing himself in the process. That is Odysseus to his core. Not self-denial. Total appetite, totally controlled. Circe turns his men into pigs, animals with no names, no stories, no Kleos. Odysseus forces her to reverse it. Every time something in the poem tries to strip his men of their humanity, he fights it. Not out of sentiment, because you cannot build a legend without witnesses. And then there is the moment that reveals everything. The Cyclops asks his name. Odysseus tells him nobody. Odyssey in Greek. A brilliant trick. The Cyclops screams to his brothers that nobody is hurting him, and they leave him alone. It saves his life. He is free. He is on the raft. The sea is opening up ahead of him, and then he cannot stop himself. He stands on the raft and shouts back across the water. His real name, Odysseus, son of Laertes, of Ithaca, the man who blinded you. Remember my name. Tell your father. Tell Poseidon. Tell everyone. Polyphemus, the son of Poseidon, hears it. Calls on his father. Poseidon hears it. And the 10-year nightmare of trying to get home begins in that moment. Because Odysseus could not bear to be nobody for one more second. Not even when being nobody had just saved his life. Every scholar of Homer has asked the same question. Why would the most clever man in the world do something that stupid? Why shout your name at the son of a god who wants you dead when you're already free? Because he had to. Because for a few minutes on that raft, he had been Odyssey. Nobody. And being nobody, even for the length of a boat ride, was worse than being cursed by Poseidon himself. He needed the Cyclops to know who had beaten him. He needed the story to exist. He needed to be Odysseus again so badly that he traded 10 years of suffering for the chance to say his own name out loud. That is the secret reason Odysseus never gave up. It was never about getting home. It was never about Penelope. It was about remaining someone, remaining the man the story was about. Because the moment he stopped fighting, the moment he accepted the island or the lotus or the forgetting or the anonymity, he would cease to exist in the only way that ever mattered to him. He was not afraid to die. He was afraid to be forgotten. And here is what Homer understood that nobody since has had the courage to say directly. That fear is not a weakness. It is the thing that drove him. The thing that got him off Calypso's island and through the Cyclops cave and past the sirens and all the way back to Ithaca after 20 years, when every other man who sailed with him from Troy was dead. The gods could not kill him. The monsters could not kill him. The only thing that could have ended Odysseus was the acceptance of a life without a story worth telling. He never accepted it. Not once. Not for a single morning on that shore. 3,000 years later, you know his name. He knew you would. What would you refuse to give up, even if it cost you everything? Leave it below.